You are listening to Did You Hear?
Did you hear?
Did you hear?
Did you hear? The Johnson County Library Podcast.
This is your Library Insider.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Did You Hear? This is Dave Carson and this is your Library Insider. A couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation on the promotional punch of podcasting at the Kansas Library Association conference. We're gonna just share that as this episode. I hope you enjoy it and find it useful. If you have any interest in becoming a podcaster, or if you have a nonprofit and really want to get the word out, I really believe that it's a great way to communicate with your audience. One show note, this is the last episode, dramatic pause, of the year. We're coming back in 2021. We're going to regroup. We're going to bring in some other folks, and we're going to have some exciting changes. So wait for those. Until then, happy holidays, everyone, and enjoy yourselves, but we will be back.
Thanks for coming, everyone. I'm Jeff Hickson at the State Library, moderating this session, or at least monitoring Zoom for this session. And since we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to directly turn it over to Dave Carson of Johnson County Public Library for the session.
Well, hi there. Thank you all for coming today. Listen, my co-host for this presentation and for the podcast is Melissa Horak-Hearn, and she is unable to attend today with some family issues. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I have one of my colleagues, Amy Jo. She's going to monitor those and interrupt me periodically to ask, but I do want you to ask questions if you have any. I'm not the expert, but I have done this for a couple years, and so, I have some things to share, some lessons learned. I hope you get a lot out of this, and ultimately, I hope you'll give it a shot because I think it is a really effective way to communicating with your audience. One note, we just had 10,000 downloads as of yesterday, and that's with an asterisk, and I'll tell you later in our session exactly what that asterisk is about. And I will be using the audio from this very session as our 50th podcast. So without further ado, I have some slides to share, and I will do that. Okay. So the name of the session is the Promotional Punch of Podcasts. And so I am Dave Carson. I am from the Johnson County Library. And I am a web content developer. I've been doing this for about 14 years. Before this, I was at Iowa Public Television. I've always enjoyed working for nonprofits and working in the multimedia realm and communication and web and all of that good stuff. So the big takeaways for today, I want you to realize that really anybody can do this. Really, the only one that can tell you no is you, and there's really no excuse not to. No matter the budget, no matter the time, your technology, aptitude, or talent. And so I'm sounding like a motivational speaker, but it's true. I think you should give it a shot and see how it goes. The one thing that I really want to stress is it's better to be authentic than to be good. Just be yourself and really realize that this is an opportunity for you to directly communicate with your audience, and they'll appreciate you just being yourself. And also note that podcasting is not everything. It is just part of that communication stew that you are offering folks. For some folks, it's the best way to communicate with them, not everyone. Well, so for our podcast, our general format is that we have an introduction with some music. There's a little spoken part. We have a weekly word. We have some music, an introduction, an interview, a little bit of more music. Then we usually have librarians phone in with some book recommendations, closing message, and music. And so the history of the podcast, the why has changed. So this kind of started when we were meeting as our promotional committee, and we were trying to figure out, some other ways that we can promote our events. And so we did that for about the first 6 to 8 months of our first year of the podcast. And what we discovered is that there's a couple problems with that. One, if you're just doing events, it's not timely. Once that event has passed, nobody really wants to go listen to promotions about old events. And so if you really focus in on concentrating on your services and all the good stuff you have to offer, that's timeless. And so you can keep using that and putting it out there in your social media channels or on your website. And so we really moved away from events. And what we found is that people really love not only learning, having a deep dive about our services that we offer, but the behind the scenes stories. Those are the ones that really tend to get a lot of attention. What I was trying to play for you just a moment ago was an introduction from our census episode. And so that is our #1 episode. And granted, that has some really great information. So that's why that was popular. But if you see the graphic here, this was found in our return bin. It says, how many beans until I'm satisfied? What? Why do people put things like this in our return bins? And so that was a very popular episode as well. And so what we found is, just to kind of personalize the library and tell people those stories that we share with each other, well, why not share with our patrons as well? So some highlights that we've had. Doing this podcast gave me the opportunity to interview Mike Massimino, an astronaut. And I think that just putting yourself out there and giving yourself a chance to talk about the events and the things that are interesting about your library and things that are happening at your library, you get to be a part of that. And we happen to have Mike Massimino come to our library for a presentation, so I got to interview him. And so that was pretty exciting stuff. We're averaging about 210 listeners per episode, and we hope to grow that. But like I said earlier, this doesn't have to be the end all be all. So, as long as it's part of our reach, that's what we're really going for. So I said the what has changed, but the how has changed as well. So we originally started on YouTube, and I think we had 23 episodes on there. And so earlier when I said there was an asterisk when we hit 10,000 downloads, we had actually had quite a few people following us on YouTube. And that was a quick, free, easy way for us to get our podcast out there and started. And then once we saw that we had an audience, we decided to go to a more professional platform. And so anytime that we need help in the process of any of the steps that we need to do, whether any kind of technical glitches or things like that, we simply go to YouTube for help, and that's really helpful. So our process begins with planning and scheduling and kind of taking a look at what is happening in the library, what services that we feel like would be beneficial for people to really have explained and shared with them. So we brainstorm a lot of different topics. We also try to get patrons involved. And so we ask them through social media like Facebook and Twitter, what topics are they interested in? We also get them to participate in the podcast by asking them to have, identify words that we can use for our weekly word. And so we really identify all our needs and interests, and then we make appointments with all of the folks that are going to be involved with our podcast. So still on process, equipment, and podcast hosting services. So recording, any microphone will do. What I would do if you're considering doing podcasts is do an assessment of what your organization already has. If you have stuff lying around, use it. It's cheap. Get started. Then once you get rolling, you can make a case for getting some fancier equipment. So really, any microphone that works with your computer is great. A headset like this with a microphone, while we've been away from the library and working from home, this works just fine. And also consider purchasing a handheld field recorder. If you don't have that, you can always use your phone. Use the recorder on your phone. And so those are some really great ways to get started for the basics of recording. For a professional setup, consider getting a digital audio interface. We prefer the Scarlett Focusrite, and that's where you can take these XLR, those are those 3-prong microphones that you see musicians use and things like that. And we always get condenser microphones. And then, believe it or not, these swing arms that hold the microphone and have a little kind of, you've probably seen like your favorite musician singing, and they've got like a little black circle around them between their mouth and the microphone. That's to protect from the P's and the S's. And so, believe it or not, that swing arm is like $12 on Amazon.com. And so it really helps prevent a lot of little bumps and things that can disturb your recording. And so software, if you want to go the free route, I would take a look at your computer, see what kind of software you already have on it. I know to download, you could use Audacity. On a Mac, GarageBand is always a good option, and it comes with most Mac operating systems, I believe. We were using GarageBand, but now we use a product called Adobe Audition, and there would be a learning curve to that, but I think whatever you chose to use, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. But like I said, go to YouTube, look at the videos anytime that you have any trouble. Now, during the COVID period, one of the things that we encountered is, we can't be in the office to record our podcast. And so we had to do everything from scratch and kind of start over and do it from home. And one of the pieces of software that we use, and I would encourage you all to check this out, it's free. They do have a pay version, which gives you a higher quality recording. But let me kind of temper that by saying the end file that you upload to your podcast hosting service is going to be an MP3. And so the free version of Zencastr will record an MP3, whereas you can get a pay version where you're getting a WAV file. But honestly, we've been using Zencastr during the COVID period, and it has been just great for us. It's been crystal clear audience, and I would encourage you to go to our podcast home, which is jocolibrary.podbean.com, and you can find our podcast there. And our last episode was cash bail, and that was done almost exclusively through Zencastr, and I think you would agree that the quality is really good. So other ways to get staff involved in the recording. So one thing that I realized very soon, and maybe you're like me, maybe your phone is digital, and those messages that people leave you are a digital recording. And so those can be used in your podcast. So what I do is I have people phone in messages, and then I'll take those messages, that actual file, and I can use that audio file and put it right into my podcast. So what are some examples? Well, I have staff call in with author quotes. I have staff call in with book reviews or book suggestions, or really any item in our collection. Then I also have people from the community that we want to get involved in the podcast. So we have different writing contest winners. We'll have them call and read their stories. So we've had elementary kids do that, teens do that. We put out a publication called Elementia. So we've had different writers and poets and artists call and talk about their work, and it's a quick and easy way to get them involved. And so, using your phone. Still on process equipment and podcast hosting services, editing. So let's talk a little bit about pre-produced bits. So like I said, we have an intro to our show, so that's pre-produced. We usually have a closing that's pre-produced. Then pre-produce with somebody doing the weekly word. And then we use royalty-free music. And so some of the services that I've used are Incomtech, Purple Planet Music. You can use YouTube. And then one thing that I find is helpful in the editing process for us, and this is just a style choice, and also because of time, it's not the only thing I do in my job for sure, and I'm sure this would not be the only thing you do in your job. We try to keep those conversations intact. We don't go through and edit out every little or time that we misspeak, and I misspeak all the time, and I'm okay with that. Anyways, that's editing. And so then the publishing process, like I said, we originally did this on YouTube, and you could edit this in a video editing program and upload it to YouTube. Or if you're going to use an audio editing program, we have a service that we pay for. I believe it's $12 a month, but a quick search on the internet will reveal that there are a number of free sources as well, as long as your patrons don't mind a few commercials. But we use Podbean. And so basically, after I get done editing an episode, I will export it, and then I go to the interface at Podbean, and I upload the episode. I upload some artwork, and by the way, all the artwork that you see as part of my slideshow here is from different episodes of our podcast. And so then I write a quick description and I hit publish, and it's out there in the world. And the nice thing is there's a share function, and I can then either share that URL to the podcast, or I can take basically a widget and I can embed that into our website. So that's what I do. So I guess the one thing I do want to mention is then for those images, we use iStock, but there are all sorts of free image services out there that you can use to create an episode image. Okay, staff involvement. I don't know if any of you recognize this guy, but this is Greg Windsor. He's one of our Readers Advisory librarians, and he's kind of a superhero. So one of the goals I had with this podcast was to make sure that we had as many voices represented in the library as possible. I always said that librarians are so freaking smart and so interesting, we need to have their voices heard. And so having them as the guests on the podcast, or just getting them involved in any way, whether that's pre-recorded parts or having them call in, or even just to be consultants, that's what makes the library podcast successful, and I think rewarding to everyone around. And it's really a group effort in that way. I think at one point, just after the first year, we had well over 50 different people get involved with the podcast from our staff. And I realize there's a lot of different size of libraries here, and I guess we're pretty big. But I think if you ask around, you'll be surprised at how many people would be interested in participating, even just a little bit in your podcast. So, like I said, just try to involve anyone, whether they're arts, music, exterior folks that are exhibiting artists, or Readers Advisory. We have a program we call Author Research in Action, where we bring in external folks. So we bring in 2 award-winning authors, and one is a subject matter expert and the other is doing research for, a book in that topic field. And so they conduct the interview themselves. A lot of times, my favorite episodes are the ones where I introduce it and I get the heck out of the way. Have librarians interview authors or other people, maybe in the business community or in politics. With the author research in action, it's so neat to just turn it over to 2 authors and let them talk, and it's pretty cool. It's a great way for us to reach out and talk a little bit more about civic engagement beyond what we have in our programs. Career and finance, especially during COVID, there's been such a need and so many questions about, jobs and career and what to do and where to look. And so having a voice for those librarians on the podcast is really important. E-resources. Oh my gosh, I put e-resources. E-resources. So e-resources, a lot of that is still a mystery to a lot of our patrons. And so the more attention you can give, the better. And sometimes people just like to hear it, or they like to see it, not just read it. And so, like I said, the podcast is part of a mix of a lot of different types of communication to your audience. And then we have different guests that come from our actual programs, come be part of the podcast. And so Mike Massimino was a good example of that. And we were just talking today that we're going to have some authors come. And so, be nice to have some of those authors come be part of the podcast months before they are going to be at our event. And it's a great way to promote their visit. So some of the topics, like I said, we did a lot of behind the scenes of Library Land. We spotlight services like e-library and other things like that. We have quirky little genres in our collection, like, if you ask your librarians, you'll find out that they have some varied interests, and we have a K-pop expert, and really everything Korean media. And so she's done 2 podcasts. One was on Korean television, and then K-pop. And then it's okay to, have the occasional event or program, that you're going to share. It's not going to be timeless, right? And so somebody in the future is probably not going to go back and listen to that one. But some things are so big that you really want to make sure that you have it on the podcast. Also, I mentioned teen and kid author readings, and then really anything that is good sound. And so, all right. So how does podcasting fit into your marketing plan? Well, like I said before, it doesn't have to be everything. It's just one of many approaches, and it's a fun part of marketing, because any of you that are marketing events to your audience, it's hard work, and this is kind of that reward. It's that really enjoyable payoff to all the hard work. And I think it's kind of like teaching, when you're in front of a classroom, you tend to learn more about the topic than your students do, right? And so when you're putting together marketing for your different events and programs and services, writing about it isn't enough. You need to tell someone. And so podcasting is a great way to do that. At this point, I realized I probably talked really fast, and I'm to the good luck screen. And this is where we hope that these tips will help you go out and create something awesome. And if you ever need help at all, please feel free to reach out. And I see my email address is incorrect. It's actually carsond@jocolibrary.org. And I would be happy to help you get started in any way, that I can, or if you ever have troubleshooting. Like I said, I've been in this field for about 25 years, and I've been at Johnson County Library for 14. So we've only been doing podcasting we've been 2 years on Podbean and about another 6 to 8 months on YouTube before that. But with that, Amy, were there any questions that came in?
We don't have any questions. We do have, I posted the link to our podcast, and Nancy posted the link to her library's podcast. She says, we do local author interviews, author readings, oral histories, blogs, and readers theater. So definitely check that one out too. We do have one question from Boyd. How easy is it to do a remote interview?
Okay, so with this software called Zencastr, let me just pull this up here. And there are others that you can use, but with Zencastr, what's very cool about it is that you use Zencastr as the place that you do your recording for a remote recording. So this is how it works. All right, I'm going to go in, and I've created an account at Zencastr, and again, it's free. And so then I give my recording a title, and I put in the email addresses and the names of the folks that I want to participate. Then I hit send or invite. Zencastr sends an email to those folks. And so I always tell the people that I'm going to be interviewing, look for this email from Zencastr 10 minutes before we start recording. And so they get that, and they come into what I call the lobby. So they follow this link, and we're all in this place together in Zencastr. That's the lobby. That's where we coordinate, and we all kind of plan out what we're going to do. I answer any questions. I double check to make sure everybody's using a headset and a microphone, and that I can hear them, and that they can hear me. And then we hit the record button, and we go into this other online room, and we start recording. And at the end, what happens is every person that is recording to their own computer and in kind of like RAM memory. And so instead of, like, say you have 3 people in the interview, instead of all that going to a central place to be recorded, where that's 3 different pathways where things can go wrong, you can get audio warbling and all that. Instead, it's recording straight from your microphone, each participant's microphone. So you end up with 3 different files that you'll have to assemble later in the editing process, but it ends up with just crystal clear files. And so the recording is great. I can't recommend it highly enough. And during the COVID period, they are making this completely free. It's usually free with stipulations, like you can only do like 1 recording a month, or you can only have 1 guest. But right now it's like unlimited guests, and as long as you want. And so highly recommend that. And any other questions?
Yes, we've got a question from Nancy. Have you done any podcasts where the person you are interviewing is on the phone only, not a computer or a smartphone?
I have not. However, I think that the best solution for that would be to look at apps if you have a smartphone and consider what telephone recording software is available, and that would probably be the easiest way around that one.
So we have a couple other questions. Nancy says thank you for that answer. What kind of mixer or soundboard do you use? Is there a particular feature that is absolutely necessary or at least highly recommended? And then any other recommendations for gear like mics or headphones?
Yeah, okay, sure. So what we use, we have our condenser mics on mic stands. When we're in office, those microphones plug into a digital audio interface. And so I can control the levels on that. And basically, I can plug headphones into it and kind of monitor the volume. And you have to constantly remind people to put their mouth just real close to the microphone. You don't want people far away. And so that records directly into a computer. You could use GarageBand, you could use Audacity. We use Adobe's Audition. Now, I will say this, if you don't have the budget for a digital audio interface, that is not a game breaker at all. I think the one and only thing we've learned during the COVID era is that, you know, it's really about the communication. And I think people are pretty forgiving about the quality because we're all using what we have right now. And I think if you just have a microphone that you can plug directly into your computer and you have that audio software pulled up, you're going to be just fine. It's going to be a good recording. It's just if you're able to use higher end equipment, then it'll sound better. And the nice thing is have your podcast grow. Start off small. Go inexpensive, and as you get a following, you can make a case to someone to get some grant money and get you something a little nicer. Any other questions, Amy?
No other questions right now.
Yeah, so I'll just say that it takes a little bravery to put yourself out there and to kind of engage in this, but I really feel like it's an effective thing, and don't be afraid to fail. There's a lot of trial and error. When I first started at our library, we partnered with science organizations, and we were part of a group called KC Science Inc. And so I did a podcast called I'm a Scientist podcast. And it was where I would go and interview different scientists in the area, and they would talk about their career. And it was really interesting. The failure there was that I didn't know the equipment back then. And, a lot of times when I thought I was recording with my external microphones plugged into my computer, I discovered that my jacks were bad. The inputs were bad. And so every interview I had was actually recording through the microphone on my computer. Well, sometimes the computer was far away from, my subject. And so those recordings just weren't great. And some of them were just not usable at all. And so, I think the important thing is that's okay, learn from that. And there'll be other episodes. Back then, it was only a handful that we had for KC Science Inc. and I'm a Scientist. But here we are, at Johnson County, for the Did You Hear podcast, I guess that's 73 episodes, 50 of them on our current hosting service, Podbean. So definitely allow yourself to learn. But isn't that what we do at a library?
Dave, we had one more question come in. Any headphone or mic brand recommendations?
Okay, so the Shure microphone is it's a real proven microphone that a lot of folks will use. If you just search for Shure and look for a condenser microphone, you'll recognize it because like any band that you've ever seen, any musician, this is what they use, and it's $99. So if it, it's a little pricey, but it's not as pricey as some microphones. And as far as headphones, I love the brand Sennheiser. Also, Sony has never steered me wrong either. We have some Sony professional studio quality headphones. But really, if you're just starting, take a look around and just see what your organization has. I mean, see what microphones are there and what headphones you have already, and then build upon that. Just swap stuff out as you can afford it. If you can afford it right now, yeah, the Shure microphone is good. Sennheiser makes excellent microphones. One thing that we do is we swap out some of the shotgun microphones that we have for our video cameras, and we use those to record guests. We also have some Sennheiser microphones that are used to dangle over an amplifier for a guitar or any kind of instrument like that. We can use those to record, but generally we just use those Shure ones. The nice thing is if you start collecting all these microphones, you can interview a bunch of people all at the same time. Any other questions?
No other questions. Thank you, Michael, for the link to the Shure microphones. That's great.
Great. Yeah, I'll go back to that screen that had some of our suggestions here of equipment. Yeah, just to review, Zencaster is good for doing remote recordings, and then Adobe Audition or GarageBand or Audacity are good, and they're all what you call non-linear editors. And so if you think about linear editors, back in the day when you had like a one single strip of tape, audio tape, or even film, if you wanted to, cut it, you had to physically cut it and then tape it together. So non-linear editors, it's kind of a misnomer because it's still in a line, but you get multiple lines, so several tracks. And so in these editors, you're able to put different voices on top of each other. And that's what a recording session is. The nice thing about that is you can go and edit out anything that is a problem. Somebody coughs or goes on a cursing spree. That doesn't happen. Let's see.
We do have another question.
Sure.
How do you measure your audience response?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we have been really judging it by the number of folks that just, audience listens, the numbers of listens. And so that's provided by our podcast hosting service, Podbean. And so that tells us how many people are listening each episode. It also breaks down the engagement, like how long they're listening. And, kind of informally, when you hear back from your audience or when you put a question out there on social media, that kind of is like I said, an informal way to kind of gauge interest and to know that people are out there. Any other questions?
No other questions have come in.
Okay.
Oh, wait, just kidding. One just came in. Have you used the voice recording app on an iPhone to convert into your podcast?
No, I haven't, but I think that's a really great point of really looking at, one, what you're familiar with, two, what's available to you. Use those things and you'll be surprised at how many things are already out there to help you get started on your podcast journey. And so it's been a really rewarding experience doing this podcast. And some of the highlights, like our census episode, we had 975 listens to that. And I think it's because it's information that people really want and they don't know who to go to. They go to the government website and they might find it confusing. But they came to our podcast because they wanted to hear it. They want to hear somebody explain it to them. And so it's those kind of topics that I feel like have been just really rewarding. And so, I hope all of you will consider podcasting as part of your promotional push. And if you do, please reach out to me and let me know. I'll be a follower. I'll listen to your podcast, and maybe you'll do the same for us. But like I said, it's not just the events, but the services, and then just helpful information that the community needs. Like I said, the last episode was our cash bail episode, and that's really about an issue in the community. Some of the others, like I said, I try to get as many different voices from the library to participate. And so I've done these, what I call 5 for 5 episodes, where we do 5 different topics from 5 different people, 5 minutes at a time. And so it really gives you a chance to go through all the different parts of the library and just say, hey, what's going on? And you'll find that it's a really great way to spread the word about the good work that everyone's doing. While there is 5 minutes left here, I will kind of highlight some of the things that we've done. So we've had an episode of Young Fantasy Writing Contest winners, and so great to be able to have patrons participate in the podcast. And then I talked about our author research in action. So having a discussion about incarceration and how that led to a career in being a writer. I think that's fascinating. One of our programs was Dungeons and Dragons, and so a librarian and some other librarians, they had me play the game of Dungeons and Dragons as a podcast to demonstrate what people would actually experience in our live program. It's always great to, like summer reading recommendations, it's always great to get librarians to talk about books and those types of suggestions. And I don't know if I mentioned, we try to involve our local arts community. And so we'll have artists come in. And so that includes like exhibiting artists as well as musical artists. And so the musical artists are great because they get to play music, and we get to record them and talk to them a little bit. And they're usually involved in some of our physical programming. And so it's great to include them. Same with the exhibiting artists or just professional artists, like children's book illustrators. And so sometimes, you can grab them and get them on the podcast and talk to them before they're part of one of your programs.
We had another question come in, Dave.
Sure.
Michael says, I was late to the party, so I apologize if you already answered this, but is this something that can be done without sinking tons of time into it?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think it's as little or as much as you want. I mean, certainly consider what your audience needs. And I was thinking about this, that there might be some libraries out there that really all you need is to do a quarterly podcast and say, hey, here's what's coming up in, the next 4 months. And that's it. Do 4 of those each year, Um, but honestly, it's you talking. And one of the points that I made earlier is that you don't have to edit everything. We try to just leave the conversations intact. And we just say, hey, you know what? We're a library podcast. We're trying to convey some information. Our goal is not to be perfect. And one of the points I made earlier at the onset was it's better to be authentic than to be good. Well, I think that is about it then. I would definitely use your creativity to think about the different ways that you could use podcasting um, in your promotional soup. But do take a look at our jocolibrary.podbean.com page and take a look at all the different types of episodes that we've had, and it might get the ball rolling. It might help you think about all the different things that you could do. Um, you know, when we shared all the things that we found in our return bin, or when we had an episode on library hacks, it's a really fun way to connect with the audience, and it's neat to see when they share those things with other people, and just spreads the word about what we're doing at the library.